Welcome back, and in this segment we will be talking about the green entrepreneurship and how we can create an eco and environment friendly business. And I'm happy to have with me today Mr. Abdo Magdy, and he's an entrepreneurship expert. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Abdo. First, define to us what does it mean by a green startup?
Yeah, I think like green, usually when the word
Yes.
is used, it has to do with the environment. So like when we talk about green business or green startups, we're talking about businesses that's
Yes.
taking the environment into perspective and built around objectives to sustain the environment and like take care of the environment while conducting its businesses. So I think in the past decade or something, there have been a lot of talks around like CSR and like the social responsibility of the businesses to consider the environment while operating their businesses. This is almost the next generation or the second generation from this thinking, is that you're creating businesses on top of ideas that's about taking care of the environment. So that's what green startups is.
Yes, and what about your particular program? Because I understand that you're part of an interesting initiative as well.
Yeah, I think that the SwitchMed initiative is executed by the European Union, and they have the partners here in Egypt to kind of get in touch and work closely with green startups, which is something that's been happening in the past like almost 3 to 4 months. So in like a process for green startups, those with interesting ideas and projects in socially responsible or environmentally responsible businesses around the theme of responsible consumption and production, like applying to the SwitchMed program, which is like executed by a number of organizations, including the UNIDO and particularly funded by the European Union. And throughout the process, there were like 8 companies selected to pitch their businesses to startups. So they went through the process of training and capacity building in order to kind of build the core business model for their businesses and also be ready to pitch their businesses to investors. So yeah, like SwitchMed contest, it's actually executed regionally around the Mediterranean, like the south of the Mediterranean. So Egypt was one of the participating companies in the contest, and we had 8 companies selected to pitch. And like in the event itself, there were 7 companies that presented their businesses to investors and stakeholders.
So, in your opinion, why for-profit companies might consider the environment?
That's a very good question. I think it's one of the first questions that we have got while working with the entrepreneurs themselves, because they asked why would investors invest in something that takes care of the environment other than something that goes after profit. So I think the paradigm shift that's happening right now is that beside operating a business that seeks profit, like considering the environments and the concepts around the environment might actually make the business more profitable, which is one of the most obvious cases in the companies presented, is like utilizing like assets that does not have value right now and actually generating value out of this through the process managed by the company would actually create. In one of the cases, one of the companies that participated in the program, it actually creates a new material out of getting 2 recyclable materials and mixing them together, like creating like another material with better mechanical properties, and as a result using this material to build usual products that's used in things like lighting poles, etc. And the result of their products is 3 times cheaper than the ones in the market. So for them, they can keep a profit margin that's much higher, and they would actually supply products that's very effective and fulfills the objective with even better properties. So if we look at it from this perspective, there is a lot of innovation that can take place in using recyclable materials to create both profit while also taking care of the environment. Another idea that was shared is dried fruits and vegetables. And like the idea is that in Egyptian farmers, they almost waste like 40-50% of the crops, especially for very specific crops. And like one of the innovators in the program, like he created a device through which these farmers can actually dry these vegetables and fruits in-house in the farm itself. So they actually they can ship it or they can transport it to the markets in which it's being sold way cheaper, because by then you can condense like 50 tons into just 1 ton like when you dry it, which actually was a very smart idea, which like it would have both an economic potential and also would kind of solve like an immense problem that's facing like farmers and the economy at large.
Yes, I understand also that there was one of the projects where they mixed the fiberglass with cotton or
Yes.
cottonage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That was a project that I was initially talking about. Yeah,
Yes.
mixing fiberglass with hardened cartoons,
Yes.
and by then creating a new material. And the good thing is that like these products are being bought by even like Ministry of Interiors and some high-profile customers who are using it in lots of applications like in-street booths, traffic booths, like poles and different applications in which that the material is proving to be a very good alternative the ones in the market. So, and that's potentially a huge market to be addressed. So, like, there is a lot of scope for innovation, for new ideas that like goes around recycling, while also being under the theme of being responsible in consumption and also responsible in production. So you're not abusing the environment in any way, and you're using materials that's already partially produced.
Yes.
So tell us about the investors. Were they interested in adopting some of these projects and start implementing them?
Yes, definitely. I think when it comes to investors, investors usually look at like two perspectives. Like there is a perspective which is like the hard part, which has to do about the business model and the financial aspect, because that's their job. They're investing money and they're expecting return. So for when the hard part is kind of fulfilled with the data and the entrepreneur being ready and presentable, by then I think lots of these, especially private investors, they would actually consider projects because they also take care of the environment. So there is a sense of being motivated by the fact that this is an environmentally responsible business is even a plus for some of the investors once the interest and the profit is secured, of course.
Yes. I understand that there were several projects as well, and I'm quite interested in the one that turns waste into fertilizers. That's a very interesting project, especially that in Egypt we have a lot of waste.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's one of the interesting projects that was presented, is that you can use waste, and they're building quite a big device. So that's one of the challenges for the entrepreneurs, that they needed the capital in order to build like a large chamber for kind of processing the waste. And basically the idea is you're collecting organic waste, and then they have a device like a chamber through which they convert this into fertilizers. And basically this fertilizer can be used as a cheaper alternative to kind of planting, even in like areas in which that's currently it does not have the right soil for like plantation. So the project has a lot of potential, especially when it comes to like Egypt's objective to expand the green parts of Egypt. So they produce fertilizer that's much cheaper and also fulfills a lot, because I think we import lots of fertilizer. So there is a gap in Egypt's production versus the import, and we have been trying to reduce the gap for importation. So that's another interesting project that fulfills the gap of our need to import, and also opens up lots of potential. But then if we have cheaper fertilizers that's usable for creating much more green space in Egypt, I think that's a very interesting idea and a very interesting concept. Usually the challenge is that entrepreneurs get stuck at the execution challenge, because to do something like that you need at least £500,000 Egyptian pounds. So who's going to do the initial £500,000? So I think that's why there is also, beside the private investors who would probably could consider the risk once they see the maturity, I think there could be engagement with different government entities.
Yes, you told me that you were cooperating with the Ministry of Environment as well in these projects, right?
Yes.
What other institutions are you cooperating with?
Well, I think in the event itself, we had representative from the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Relations. So these were all official parties, and we were also doing engagement with GAFI and multiple other entities like under the umbrella of these ministries. So I think there was some quite good engagement with different institutions, and also we produced some materials after the event to continue further engagement with these projects and mobilize support for these entrepreneurs.
Now, so you've spoken about some of the challenges, but what other challenges are you facing, especially to be able to promote for your startups?
Yeah, I think like like part of the challenge for startups is actually building a startup, because building a company, it sounds like an exciting venture, but there is a lot of work behind the scenes. So there is a lot of challenges in getting the entrepreneur ready and get them committed and get them to work on a business for an extended period of time. Because like all these projects we're talking about, you can look at the entrepreneurs have been working from 3 to 5 years to get the projects to this level of maturity. So this is a lot of work and a lot of commitment that's being put into the project. So guaranteeing this continuous commitment is something that's very vital to the survival of the idea, the concept, and its potential success. Also building a team, like moving beyond the innovation, because like we're talking about innovative concepts here. Like if you're capable of moving beyond the originator of the idea and building a team and an institution, I think that's the most difficult transition, is that there is someone who built something of value. Now we want to appreciate this person, recognize what they have done, and they want to build an institution, which is what a company is, around this concept, to be able to scale this impact and have people with different skill sets in like marketing and business, in sales, etc., to be able to expand the company. So moving from an individual innovator's idea, which is pretty smart and has an impact, into a company that's executing this aggressively in the market. That's where we need lots of the stakeholders to be involved, and that's why the event took place, in order to collect and gather the stakeholders and the investors to support these projects.
So what are the next steps for green startups in Egypt?
Well, I think by now, I think these green startups who participated as a SwitchMed contest, I think they gained quite an exposure and experience when it comes to their businesses. Like one of these participating companies is traveling to Barcelona, like to participate at SwitchMed Connect next year. So they are having even international exposure to represent Egypt in an international contest.
Yes, SwitchMed is an annual occasion, annual event.
Yes, I think it's a program by the European Union. I think they have an annual event that takes place to gather different parties. And beside this, like a single company that's presenting its project, is that the rest of the companies are continuously working on a project. We're continuously in contact with them to make sure that they are proceeding with contacting investors and stakeholders. And we look forward for opportunities to connect with any stakeholders. So I think they to find online, even if you Google and search for green startups in Egypt, I think you're gonna land on some of these projects, and potentially they would be very open for different types of collaboration.
Now, how expensive are these startups? Like to create a business which is environment friendly, is it cost friendly, or is it inexpensive because of the devices you'll need to use?
Well, I think that would depend on each individual case, but we can say that like these entrepreneurs, they bootstrap their companies so far, so they were actually spending on their own. So we would think that they spent probably a few $1,000s in kind of building the devices, etc., and they reach the prototype stage. And I think that's the stage in which that a business needs an external capital. So I think like most of the startups were raising somewhere between 500,000 to 2.5 million Egyptian pounds. Like 500,000 Egyptian pounds to 2.5 million Egyptian pounds, these startups at these stages.
In a sense, that's a lot for a young person, isn't it?
Well, I think it might be young for like much for a young person, but I don't think they were young. I think like some of the participating companies were more mature individuals with a lot of experience.
I'm talking about the youth themselves, the entrepreneurs who started the idea itself.
Yeah, I think like we can be pretty flexible in defining youth. So I think some of the participants was like 45 and 50 years old.
Yes.
So that's still an innovative concept, and they are still entrepreneurs. So they actually also they are managing cash flow. So they are used to running companies. Some of these are already existing companies with existing cash flow. The mixing of the fiberglass, etc. That's an operating company. So they know what to do with the money. And but then even like some of them who are at a less mature stage, they would require less amounts of capital. But when it comes also to investing for like professional investors, they would be looking for like amounts like 500,000 Egyptian pounds, 2.5. That's still very comfortable for investors.
So how do you choose the participating companies?
Well, the participating companies was choosing SwitchMed contest itself, which is like managed from Barcelona. So I think like the idea was looking at the startups with the most potential, those who already have exerted efforts in building something. They have a product, and they would need this kind of training and exposure in order to like take it to the next level.
Do you find many Egyptian companies interested in this event?
Yeah, I think this is almost one of the early times it's being done in Egypt, and I think the level of participation and commitment of the participants had been very good.
Now, apart from this particular event, tell me more about what do you advise entrepreneurs when they're starting their projects?
Well, actually, there could be lots of pieces of advice when it comes to what people need to know once they're starting their businesses. But I think one of the core components that we even sensed with this program is the need to have like a sense of a timeline, in which that during the timeline you're going to be extremely focused on a very particular idea. So, for example, in the next 6 months, my company's objective is to present the business in front of this panel in this event. So I would be very focused on like bringing everything into a very specific objective that I have in mind. So I think especially when we're talking about like underfunded, understaffed companies, we're talking about the need to be very focused, because by then it's all mobilized in the mind of a single individual. So once we have a single objective, just one thing to be done, and then they bring everything under the umbrella of this one thing, because these things would be necessary for the execution. So I think like focusing on a very specific objective on time intervals would be a very good strategy for startups, like to keep moving forward whatever is happening around them.
Okay, Mr. Abdo Magdy, entrepreneurship expert, thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will be going to a quick break, and we will be looking at our light news, and we'll be back for more on Breakfast Show. So stay with us.